I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Jason Lamon. I'm with Fishbowl Solutions. And the webinar that we'll be giving today and presenting to you all on is how to accelerate your PeopleSoft accounts payable processes to overdrive with Oracle's document capture, imaging, and workflow solutions.
Craig, do you want to say a few words before we jump into this?
Sure. Just want to thank everyone for joining and look forward to the presentation here. I've done some work with George in the past and Fishbowl, and they've done a great job with some of our other customers. So we're definitely looking forward to this presentation here. And again, thanks everyone for joining.
And thank you, Craig. And as Craig mentioned, I've been working with Craig over the last year or so. My name is George Sokol. I'm an account manager with Fishbowl Solutions. I've been with Fishbowl for 4 years. I joined Fishbowl from Oracle because they were one of the longest-serving partners in this space. And specifically, I joined them to basically grow our coverage and grow our business here. Because I saw a need, and when I was at Oracle, I was on the pre-sales or sales side, and I saw a great need for customers who were looking for nimble, smaller partners that could, they could work in, get engaged in real quickly, and get some success. And that's what I saw in Fishbowl, so that's why I joined with them. I'm going to hand it back to my Director of Marketing, Jason Lamon. Jason also came from Oracle, like myself. But we're going to basically, well, Jason, why don't you take this over now and cover the agenda for the next hour.
All right, thanks, George. And thanks again, everyone, for attending. Again, my name is Jason Lamon. The agenda for today is, well, I'll provide a quick overview on Fishbowl Solutions. I think as George stated, Fishbowl is an Oracle WebCenter partner. So we do implementation services, and we also add value-add software to really help companies and organizations like yourself really maximize our Oracle technology investments. We'll be going through, as part of the imaging services offering that we have, Fishbowl's already helped a lot of companies really take a look at their accounts payable processes within PeopleSoft and help them automate those processes. Save money on the costs associated with paying invoices late, and also getting just some efficiency gains of paying invoices early and all the cost savings that are around that. At the end of the presentation today, or towards the end, I should say, I'm going to be kicking it back over to George, and George will actually walk you through the steps of what that actually looks like to image enable your accounts payable process within PeopleSoft. At the end, we're going to do questions, but we're going to try something differently for this webinar. I'm going to unmute all lines at this time, and we're just going to make this very conversational. It's not a very big audience today. We're very targeted in our reach out. Most of you probably heard from Craig, and so we want this to be interactive. So if you have questions that come up along the way, we just encourage you to ask them. The chat box is available as well, so if you might be feeling a little bit on the shy side today or whatever the case, if you have a question that you want to send through the chat box, you can use the GoToWebinar interface for that as well. So at this time, I'm going to unmute all lines. If we do pick up some background noise, we might look to mute lines again, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. So a quick few words on Fishbowl Solutions. As I said, we're an Oracle WebCenter partner. We've been doing this now for about 14 years. We've helped really, like I said, help companies really extend and maximize their WebCenter technology investments. So from an imaging standpoint, as customers have brought in the solution, really how can they image enable their accounts payable processes and other business processes within their organization. We have other expertise as well, so we've really helped companies automate and improve their overall information management strategy within their organization, and that includes building out their web content management practice or their website, as well as if they have a portal, helping them get that deployed and built up as well. A lot of customer successes across the verticals. Specifically, George is going to be sharing some successes that we've had in the public sector. So organizations just like yourselves, some of the imaging gains and benefits that those companies have realized should resonate with you. Here's a list of our consulting services. I've highlighted the ones that we will be focusing on today. So really around document imaging and forms recognition and document capture. So those key components that really help you as an organization image enable a process get that image, get that document to the right person at the right time for so they can view that, and then really automating that process along the way. So extracting the necessary information off the document and making sure that document ultimately gets to your payable system or your PeopleSoft financial system. George, I'm going to kick it back to you for a little customer success summary.
All right, so just a couple of quick case studies. These are all recent, but we've actually been doing quite a bit in the small municipality. We've done some work, for example, with the City of Seattle. We've done some work across the country. The most recent one I want to talk about is since they just recently went live, we're going to give them a few weeks to go fully live before we reveal their name. But it's basically a small city of about 250,000 people, just southeast actually of Toronto. And essentially, they were completely paper-bound. All their processes were, typical: receive an invoice, route it through inter-office mail, have people review and approve these things. And their key challenges were, A, they wanted to reduce the paper, reduce the clutter, get rid of all the file boxes that they had of invoices, the duplicate copies of invoices. They also wanted to accelerate the process. Vendor disputes, billing disputes, so that, if you're an AP clerk, you had the invoice right there, or any supporting documentation that was related to the invoice. In addition, basically accelerate the approval process as well. Their typical AP approval process is taking anywhere between 30 to as much as 45, 60 days, just because things would get lost on people's desktop. So they engaged with us in Oracle together. We provided them with Oracle WebCenter Imaging, as well as a product called Oracle Forms Recognition. Jason will cover some of these components in a moment. And the results have been the ability to implement a complete end-to-end process from the moment of receiving the invoices to approving the invoices to releasing these to PeopleSoft for payment. So if it's a PO-based invoice, we've actually been able to achieve 100% automation. So if it's a PO, it's already been approved. They already know what the line items are. They receive the invoice from the vendor. They simply set it into the scanner. Oracle scans that, does an OCR to retrieve the line item detail from that invoice, and then if there are no exceptions, it simply creates the voucher directly inside PeopleSoft. If it's a non-PO invoice or there are any issues, it doesn't recognize, for example, the line items. If the line items don't match up to the invoice total of the amount in the PO, or there's further line item distributions that need to be made by the organization, then we're basically using a workflow developed in Oracle technology to route those invoices based on the department, based on the account code, and then basically send those back into the hands of the buyer or the financial assistant to review, hand key in the distribution information in WebCenter Imaging. For them, by the way, the value was that these did not have to be users trained on PeopleSoft. They just get a real simple form with an image associated, and they can type in the details they need, click approve or click assign, and the invoice is automatically forwarded on. So they've been in live production going on 2 weeks now, and things are looking very, very favorable. Another example of the benefit to WebCenter Imaging, this is both larger and simpler, oddly enough, involves image enabling PeopleSoft within a large county office of education. So this is actually with Board of Education in California. They're using it for a wide range of purposes. They're not as completely automated on the EP side as the previous city government I talked about, but their goal is simply to get rid of paper and to not have an employee have to track down any HR, HCM for human capital management, or finance document. It'll all be there right there within the Web Center. So for this particular project, what we did was we're using a component called Oracle, from Oracle, called Managed Attachments, which basically is a way to image enable PeopleSoft with the content. Now, many of you might be saying, well, you can already add attachments. What's the value here? The key value is, first of all, avoiding the bloat that typically happens with the PeopleSoft implementation. It's not uncommon to see PeopleSoft go into the terabytes, and most of that space is devoted to attachments. By having it more properly managed in Oracle WebCenter content, you keep that PeopleSoft implementation leaner. It's easier to back up, easier to maintain, easier to upgrade. And then you also avail yourself of all the other features of content, the ability to quickly go in, for example. One thing they couldn't do if they were just using PeopleSoft attachments is have an online job bank of resumes. So this application, by having the attachment that you'd normally put into an employee record or a prospect, now that it's being stored inside Web Center content, when they're trying to fill in positions, given maybe some budgets come up, they can quickly go through, they can search on the criteria of a particular job class, see who else has applied previously, and then hopefully speed up possibly the employment process for filling in that position. So this one is just a very, very lightweight integration, but it's also a really good model for those people who are looking for some immediate benefit to get rid of paper, streamline some processes, but maybe aren't quite ready for a full end-to-end solution. Jason?
All right, thanks, George. So now I'm going to provide a high-level overview. First, kind of stating what the business problem are or have been for organizations when they're dealing with trying to automate or improve their accounts payable processes. And then we'll get into what are the components that are involved in Oracle's end-to-end image automation system for accounts payable. So really the problem that a lot of organizations deal with, and where it all starts, is with paper. So George mentioned eliminating as much paper from the process as possible. So organizations that take in invoices, obviously most organizations do that. They have to make sure that that paper gets routed to the right person. It gets stored in a location where many employees can find it quickly and easily. And then there's also the problem of the transport. So how do you actually get the paper? Are you using mail, snail mail, invoices that come in via email? There's multiple different ways, faxes. But ultimately, what does that invoice look like as it needs to be passed on to the approver and then routed back to AP for final coding and then get it into the financial system for payment? So with paper as part of that process, there's a lot of inefficiencies. Paper could get lost. You might have a lot of questions back to the vendor as far as what a line item says, because you can't really pick up. It might be a bad copy of a copy, or so on and so forth. So paper really introduces a lot of inefficiencies to AP processes. And the typical AP department, what you're looking at from a paper-based process then, is really this lag and increased cycle time of your invoice processing. So invoices come into your mailroom, they're opened, sorted, and prepped. They're passed on to the first person for that keying, the data entry into the ERP. There's some validation that occurs, and then they're routed for approval. So again, that's an all manual process, including the mail opening, the entry into the ERP, the validation, and the routing. So basically passing paper along, physically from person to person. And then the invoices come back, and you're ready for final review and payment. But in a lot of organizations, what we see is that process can take 30 days or longer. And so what you're missing out then are some of the automation gains from an imaging perspective, is that you're not going to be able to take advantage of vendor discounts if invoices are paid early. Plus, you're also probably seeing some late payments, which your fees might go up over the course of a year. And then also, from an administrative standpoint, you might have to maintain or retain a very large or larger accounts payable department. So you have many different AP clerks, and the human capital cost for that is very high. So there's some opportunities from an automation perspective for image-enabled your AP processing. And by doing so, you can really start to drive down the cost of that per invoice, the per invoice cost of processing your invoices, while also reducing the receipt to payment cycle time. And in addition to that, it's really providing the visibility to where that payment or where the invoice is in a certain queue, or what process stage is it at. So with Oracle's end-to-end system, as we'll talk about a little later, no matter where the invoice is at a particular stage, a manager or supervisor would be able to go into the system and see that, and then identify bottlenecks in the system and identify them and make sure that those are taken care of accordingly. But really what it helps you do is really drive down the labor costs associated with your manual processes for accounts payable. So being able to maintain a staff, a much smaller staff that's really working from an automated perspective, and really the work that's needed to be done from a manual is more of the vendor the issue resolution. Might be, a vendor changed their address, so you go into the system and update that, or that a scan came through from the imaging system and it just needs to be rescanned. But overall, the big payoff for a lot of companies, and what they like to see, is that if they look at the retention requirements of the financial documents they're processing, in this case invoices, getting them into a centralized content management system, and then putting some retention and records management on top of that, you'll be able to be under compliance with the regulatory laws that oversee your organization. So as we lay out the system, Oracle's end-to-end system, what's represented here are the various steps along the way that an invoice would go through, and the components that are used to really help process that and automate the process along the way. So it all starts with capture. So invoices can come in via email or fax. The capture system picks them up, or if you're scanning paper, you scan it, you image enable it, you pass it on to the next system, which really takes the information that you need off the invoice, all the invoice header information, the line item details. You're extracting that automatically from an intelligent perspective, so you're not having a physical body in a chair looking at the invoice, trying to type all that information in. It all can be extracted automatically for you. Then storing it and then accessing it in context of your PeopleSoft system. So while your PeopleSoft users are in the system, they can actually see the invoice while in the system. They don't have to jump back to the imaging system to see the invoice. It can all be accessed in context of their ERP application, in this case PeopleSoft. And really the power of this system is the ability to add some value on the workflow side, so making sure that the invoice gets into the system correctly, and then make sure that it can be monitored. So I mentioned the steps along the way. All those steps can be monitored so you can identify bottlenecks. And then really getting it down to the approval. So as we talked about, from a non-image enabled AP system, a lot of organizations are looking at 30 days on average cycle time for their invoices. With Oracle system, you'll be able to do it to dramatically decrease that, even down in down into the days. 5 to 7 days is what we've seen with other customers. So as you look at automating your accounts payable system, though, you're going to have some options. So depending on the option that you choose, which will have an associated cost, you'll be able to get various levels of automation gains along the way. So the first one kind of is the low-end automation, where after invoices have made it through the system, they've been entered into the ERP system, they've been routed for approval, and then actually ready for payment. You're scanning your invoices at the back end of that process, so you have them in that centralized repository. So if an audit happens, for example, you can go to the system, use keywords, pull up the invoice a lot quicker than from a paper file cabinet, for example. On the mid side, you can also use Oracle system to do front-end capture and data entry. So if you're looking to still have your clerks enter the data from the invoice into the system, the automation gains there is you're capturing on the front end, you're routing it to the right person for coding and approval, get into the right queue for that, and then making sure that that information gets keyed in and entered into the system where it can be accessed in PeopleSoft. What we're going to focus on today, though, is really the front-end intelligent capture and workflow. So the previous slide where I showed the various steps, we're going to talk about each of the components within those steps and the automation gains that you can realize by having a full end-to-end imaging system for accounts payable system. So images come in, they're scanned, The data off the invoice is extracted, stored. It's then routed to the right person, and then in your Access and then your ERP. So that full end-to-end system where you be able to get the highest automation from and the most gains from the system. So this is that whole process starts with document capture. So Oracle has, George touched on one use case that the large Board of Education is using, where they kind of have a distributed network of capture systems. That would be the next system we talk about. But in general, most organizations start with this centralized location where the invoices come in and they're first processed. So from a capture perspective, that means that an invoice comes in via paper, or it comes in by email, or even fax. And so you're electronically capturing that invoice, making an image of it, and passing it on to the next step. Within that, there's some various levels of functionality that you can expose that Oracle includes, including the ability to import. So I mentioned fax and email. You don't have to print off your email attachments if you have vendors sending you invoice attachments. And you can actually grab the images that would come off the fax machine. You're actually capturing and converting the native fax format into like a Word document and bringing that in and creating an image of it. So then you're ensured that you have a very crisp and legible image that can be passed along, so then the next person that needs to see that image of the invoice could view it and see all the pertinent information that they need on it to make a decision. But again, it all starts with capture. So from either a centralized approach or a distributed approach, where you're using web-based tools to really capture an image remotely. So let's say you have other locations where invoices might come in. You can image enable those locations to capture that invoice, as soon as it comes into the building. So those locations don't have to either package those invoices up and mail them to a central location, or let's hope they're not doing this, but scanning them themselves, making another image of that paper, and then emailing it along the way. And the reason I say that is because each time you make an image or do a scan of a copy, you're going to degrade the overall image. So as it gets passed down the chain, so to speak, it'll be a lot more difficult to actually see the information that's needed off the invoice, including the line item details. But from a distributed standpoint, you can really, if your organization is set up this way, you can really distribute that paper burden, but also reduce any of that inter-office shipping costs and making sure that that invoice cycle time is reduced by making sure that the invoice gets imaged at the earliest point of entry. The next piece is being able to intelligently extract the invoice information that you need to get into your PeopleSoft system. And Oracle's solution for this is very robust. So it's able to first recognize that it's an invoice, and depending on how you have it configured, ensure that the header information is extracted as well as any line item details. So it's basically this three-step process of classifying the document, in this case an invoice, extracting the information necessary, and then doing a validation and matching. An Oracle system is able to do that 2- and 3-way matching against a purchase order that exists in your PeopleSoft system. This system is set up to, after you capture the image, in the first step, it's immediately passed over. So there's not this manual intervention necessary to take any images and then offload them to this system. It's really a behind-the-scenes process where after the images are captured, and if you had to add any data on the front end, those immediately get passed to this system for extraction and getting it into your PeopleSoft system. As far as storing, so once you do that, so at this point the image has been moved. It's in your PeopleSoft system, but it's also being maintained in your central system for your central content management system, in this case WebCenter. So the great thing about the Oracle solution is, if you think about scaling, there are customers that have millions of images, millions of invoice images in their system, and the system continues to perform very well. So I mentioned auditing. If you need to pull up an invoice quickly, you can do that in context of your PeopleSoft system, but you can also go directly to the system and do keyword searches there to find the system. But again, with Oracle system, especially with the back-end power of the Oracle database, this will really scale over time for you as your invoice volumes may grow. So I've talked a little bit, I've mentioned a little bit about in-context access from your ERP system. And that's really the goal that Oracle set out to provide, is that as you're looking at automating AP, the automation game that you want to continue to have is you want your workers to stay in context of the ERP system to do their work as much as possible. So a lot of customers, what they'll do is, and it's probably no different than maybe kind of what you have today, is they'll have 2 monitors set up. They'll have their ERP system on one, and as they pull up the image, they need to look at an image. That image will appear on the other one. If they need to do any reconciliation or fix anything, they can do that. But really, it's the context of I'm in my PeopleSoft system. I need to see the image in case someone has a question or whatnot. I can do that in context of the ERP. I don't have to switch out of PeopleSoft and go over to the content management system to pull up the invoice. So from there, you can also view the user can view any of the invoices that they have to process, and it's also a very powerful viewer as well. So if there's questions on the invoice, the user can choose to annotate, basically highlight sections in the invoice that need special attention, either up the chain or back to a person that processed the invoice. So those can all be highlighted and those people will be made aware much more easily in this graphical view. I mentioned the power of workflow. So it's key that I mention, though, that Oracle's end-to-end imaging system doesn't replace any native workflow functionality that you're already getting with PeopleSoft. Instead, it augments any of those processes. So, for example, if there's supplier maintenance, so supplier changes an address, or there's information that needs to be updated in your supplier database, there's workflows that can be leveraged for that. Information requests. I mentioned rescanning invoices. So as an invoice is scanned and maybe it's passed along, and you do get the data extraction, but at the end of the day, when the user is in PeopleSoft and when they're going to access the image, it's not legible to them. They feel that it needs to be more legible. The resolution is bad. They can actually there can be a workflow for rescan invoice, so that goes into a queue and goes back to the person that can rescan that invoice. There's also very powerful email notifications of task assignments. So if there's a queue that's kind of in a bottleneck and you need to distribute the work, emails can be sent to notify other users, out-of-office emails, things like that. And then it really made making this accessible out to people outside of the PeopleSoft environment. So that's another thing from a distributed network of kind of distributing the burden. Users can access it outside the PeopleSoft system if they need to take action. And then as part of the workflow process, there's also this notion of being able to monitor. So monitor the steps that an invoice is taking, and then what step is it in, and if there's any issues along the way. So with this powerful dashboard, you're being able to really set up a reporting structure so you can view all the invoices that process in a day, week, so on and so forth, to really help you establish your key performance indicators, look to where you can maybe improve, but also really helping you view any areas where there's a problem. So I mentioned a bottleneck. If there's a bottleneck in a certain queue, then as a manager or supervisor, you'd be able to take action and help those users by distributing the work to a different queue. So again, very graphical interface that a manager would pull up to see their invoices as they're being processed. And really the final piece is the approval. So all the approvals happen in PeopleSoft, and it's getting that, the key is with this end-to-end system is really with as limited or in as few steps as possible from capture to approval, just really being able to decrease the amount of time it takes to get the invoice ready for approval.
Jason, if I may, I'd like to intercede here a little bit, just because it may sound a little contradictory. We don't mean to be. the key thing is that Jason is covering the out-of-the-box solution accelerator from Oracle. The neat thing about the solution, and I'll get some more details when I get to the screen slides, is that it can cover both. It can cover integration with PeopleSoft and using PeopleSoft for approvals, but we have also done a number of projects where all of the approvals and workflow are outside of PeopleSoft. It really depends on the customer preference, the organization, and I must concede budget somewhat, especially if you already have a PeopleSoft workflow for approvals. But anyway, just so that maybe, hopefully it'll bring some clarification, Jason, I'll let you continue, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for clarifying that, George. So the last thing I wanted to share as far as Oracle's end-to-end system is it's a productized solution, so it is supported by Oracle. Fishbowl helps really implement that system and extend the value based on your organizational needs, exactly what you need to really help you automate your invoice processing system. But as you look at integrating an imaging system with PeopleSoft, you should know that other Oracle technologies are leveraged to really make sure that it's a loosely coupled yet tightly integrated integration. So what that means for you is, as you look to upgrade your PeopleSoft system, you go to the next version, the linkage that is contained in the integration for imaging won't break. So you won't be stuck with having to have consultants back in to reintegrate and make sure all the workflows are working and all that. Those linkages should still remain, and you should be able to go forward with your imaging after you do your PeopleSoft upgrade. Other point solutions that you might hear of or have been exposed to, they're hard-coded directly inside with the ERP or with PeopleSoft. So as you upgrade the system, either system in either case, those integrations would break. With that, I'm going to turn it over to George, and George is going to provide a demo walkthrough of the solution. George?
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that. So we're just going to lead you, actually, we thought it would be easier to go through some screen slides because there's actually some bullet points we should point out. And I want to basically stress again that, and that's why if you look at the earlier slide, there was like, low volume, medium size, high volume. The solution really can scale to whatever you need from, just small, let's just get rid of paper, let's get some initial objectives achieved, to a full-on board processing integration of PeopleSoft, to full workflow routing across the organization and letting people use the Oracle WebCenter Imaging product to capture things like distribution of payment, account codes, unit codes, etc. But it all starts typically here with WebCenter Capture, which is an enterprise capture product. Those of you familiar with products like Kofax, it's very on par with those sorts of applications. You can also get images, and this is what we're doing in a lot of accounts, through things like MFD devices, where you see this a lot now. Everybody's got a multi-function device where you just go to a scanner, you take an invoice, a document, a letter, you put it in, you scan it, and you can send it someplace. We also have support there. As a matter of fact, the city government I was talking about, that's their mode of scanning. Everybody is sending their invoices to a central email address through AP, where we're automatically picking up that invoice. But here you see the interface of the Oracle WebCenter Capture product. This product basically is designed to take a stack of invoices, paper invoices, documents, or any sort of paper for that matter, feed them through a scanner, or receive through fax or through email, right? And it basically treats these into a batch. It basically will take all these. If you've got like individual invoices, it can recognize that here's 100 sheets, they're all individual. You can also, it also has support for things like separator sheets, so it'll know when a document begins and ends. Also, it has built-in cleanup capabilities, so to do a little cleanup of the image, integrate with modern technologies like VRS to ensure that when you're scanning, because I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, you might be scanning a fax, you might be scanning an old document. They don't always have the best quality. So that's some of the core features this product has is that it'll support large volume scanners and can feed it through some sort of cleanup process. Now, when you scan this, by the way, this is the interface that if you want to open up a batch, it'll actually allow you to go through all those pages that you've scanned, be able to see, all the individual items that it recognizes as an individual document. You can, if you need to, you can move things around. You can create your own documents manually here. The key idea is this is geared to let somebody go through a massive volume of paper and quickly organize these into incoming documents. At that point, once the files have been scanned or received via email or fax, and by the way, if you're receiving these electronically, there's typically no need to have an operator, view what's coming in. It'll automatically move to the next phase here, which is batch indexing. Now, in the batch indexing, there's two methods. I'm going to show you one, and I'll talk about a second method. This particular batch indexing is more of a manual, low-level indexing, where essentially an operator will go in, and a lot of times, for example, we might route this at this point to either somebody in the mailroom. For certain organizations, that works correctly. Other organizations, it might go directly to an AP clerk sitting at their desk. It might have even have been the AP clerk, by the way, that scanned these in the first place. But the product is created this way, so it allows you to distribute the work across your organization and not necessarily have everything tied up with one individual. Opening up the batch, you're presented with a screen that looks like the following, although this is one of the more simpler screens that we deploy. On the left-hand side, you'll see two fields, right? Processing group, priority, and on the right hand, you'll see a preview of the image. So typically what will happen is you scan in 100 invoices, right? You open up the batch, and then for each invoice in that batch, it'll allow you to fill in some metadata from the left-hand side while viewing the image of the invoice on the right-hand side. Now, this is a more simple, as I said, more simpler approach, where all we're doing here is we've scanned 100 invoices, and based on, say, the account field or some other information on the invoice, we're going to assign it to an individual AP clerk or a group of AP clerks for processing. Now, I said that this is one method. This is sort of the manual, basic 101. The second method of using this is integrated with a Oracle module called Oracle Forms Recognition. And I may have a slide or two later on, but I want to make sure I cover it here. The Oracle Forms Recognition actually will perform OCR on the individual invoices and pull out data that can be used to classify it inside WebCenter Imaging, as well as the process for later uploading into PeopleSoft. So it'll grab all the header information. It'll grab the any sort of vendor information, vendor codes, a PO number, address information, as well as the ability to even grab the line item details, quantity, description, price per unit, total, total price, shipping, tax, all that information. The OFR engine has the ability to retrieve from the invoice. Now, if you're sitting there wondering, or you're being a little skeptical, and you're saying, well, how well does this technology works? It actually works surprisingly well. Out of the box, it's more like a 50-60% success rate, which isn't that great, by the way. But then over the course of a few weeks to a month or so, we basically run the invoices, we tune the engine, and we can typically get as high as 80, sometimes upper 90% accuracy rate. So it really is a great way of speeding up the processing and reducing the manual keying that you typically have associated with an AP process. So the next part is, after the capture's done, is to release that information or get it integrated into PeopleSoft somehow. Now, the screens that we're going to be showing you are going to be mainly focused on the Oracle PeopleSoft solution. If something like this captures your fancy and you're interested in other options, we certainly would be happy to show you some of the more fully automated projects that we've done. But typically what happens at this point is there is integration provided directly from within the PeopleSoft screens, so that once the images have actually been scanned, you can then have an AP clerk who will be inside PeopleSoft and then can start processing those images so the data gets uploaded correctly into PeopleSoft. So at this point, they usually click Start Processing Images, and they go into the WebCenter Imaging task list. Now, the example you see here is we're basically breaking the task list by north, south, east, and west processing group. I have one customer who actually has 7 AP clerks, and each one of those AP clerks is named after one of the 7 dwarfs from Snow White. So I always feel sorry for Grumpy and Sleepy. But anyway, the idea here is that if it's not already been routed through the capture process, you can, or I'm sorry, once those items have been routed in the capture process, you go to this screen, and you can go ahead and select a work queue. And selecting that work queue will then give you a list of items that have been assigned to that work queue. Here, the user can select an individual invoice. When they select it from their work processing screen, they will be presented with a form that allows them to see any captured metadata, which is what you see at the top here. We're just showing the header, some of the header information, I believe, and whether there's been an exception code, such as, for an example, an unrecognized vendor code, or maybe a total that's been captured that doesn't quite add up to the PO amount. And then they've got a list of commands on the screen which they can execute in processing this invoice. Now, if you're using the OFR, the Oracle Forms Recognition technology I mentioned earlier, one additional thing here is it's also pulling out that line item detail information. And for some of the other customers I mentioned, it's this screen that we've modified so that they can go in and they can manually update the distribution for non-PO based items directly from this screen. So while they're looking at the image, they can go, a buyer or a financial person could go in and actually, make corrections or distribute it across the lines of the PO. Now, this particular example shows key from image. Now, at this point, some customers will have dual monitors. Some will just have one real large, landscape monitor. And so this is probably the most elementary form of using the application. We've scanned it. We've assigned it to an AP clerk. They click on a processing list, and they're off to the races. They're ready to start entering in the voucher information directly from within inside PeopleSoft while looking at the image in WebCenter Imaging. If you're utilizing the OFR process, it does go one step further, and that actually is, since you've already extracted all the line information, it can be fed directly into PeopleSoft for the, to just automatically fill this in. So again, you're not limited. You can start small. You can go big, whatever you feel is more appropriate to your organization or your budget. Once that information has been completed, right, the information is ready to save, the user can go ahead and save that. Key thing, any sort of revised account distributions or changes. For example, I have one customer, they like to short pay all their vendors by 10%, particularly if it's a services contract, right? All that information entered within PeopleSoft will be synchronized within WebCenter Imaging. And you might be saying, well, what's synchronized and why is it necessary? If you want to use the WebCenter Imaging to, for example, just do a quick survey on a vendor, like show me all invoices, because I'm getting audited. So auditor comes in, wants to look at all invoices or all checks or whatever. WebCenter Imaging's value here is allows you to query on metadata values. So it's simply pointing out on this slide that if you do make changes and you set it to synchronize, the systems keep in sync, so it'll allow you to continue to access it through PeopleSoft or directly at the images layer itself. At this point, the user just simply goes to the, from one line item to the next. They complete the invoices. It jumps to the next item in their queue. And then, here, general, either from what this slide is showing is that the other thing we'll do is, taking over the attachment, or in this case, we've actually put a little link on the PeopleSoft screen. This, by the way, is part of the Oracle Accelerator. Anytime somebody's now looking at this particular invoice inside PeopleSoft, they can immediately access that invoice by simply clicking on Invoice Image, and it'll pull up the image from within the Oracle WebCenter product. At that point, when you're viewing it, by the way, the product supports annotations, comments. So if there's some kind of dispute here, you want to make a comment or a change, you can actually do it directly on top of the image. It's an overlay, so you always maintain the original scan of the image. That doesn't get affected. But it's a great way for collaborating between, say, approvers or finance officers or AP clerks when they're working on a particular issue regarding an invoice. So it's just showing the image of the invoice popping up. And then lastly, issue resolution. This is just a quick example of one type of issue resolution. This is the most common. Typically, one of the biggest issues we see in AP processing in terms of incomplete or inaccurate data, other than the invoice adding up properly itself, is maybe the vendor information isn't quite correct in PeopleSoft. Maybe it's a new vendor location. This is mainly showing the ability to integrate directly from WebCenter Imaging. Click on a link called Vendor Maintenance, and then if you're using a separate group outside of your AP team to do vendor maintenance, which most people do, you can go ahead, enter in, here's a vendor, doesn't exist, please add it to the table, click OK, and then that will get sent as an email notification to vendor maintenance. And then once they've updated the vendor maintenance tables correctly, they can automatically notify the AP clerk, and they go back to WebCenter Imaging and continue on their work. Now, some of the advanced things we've done here is we've actually done vendor validation directly from within the Oracle WebCenter Imaging form. Allow people to search across vendors, make sure that if there's something that doesn't quite match from the invoice or whatever, they can go ahead and query directly against the PeopleSoft tables and apply that right vendor. So there's all kinds of capabilities you can do once you've got the WebCenter Imaging product in place to sort of make that validation and integration more seamless and useful for your employees. Jason?
Okay, thanks, George, for that awesome walkthrough of the various steps along the way and the components that are involved to really first image enable, route, and get that into your system for final approval and issue resolution. So before we move on to questions, we do have about 10 minutes left, so hopefully most of you can stay to ask some questions. I just wanted to provide a quick summary of what we covered today. First and foremost, what I wanted to summarize is that the solution we showed you is a complete end-to-end solution delivered by Oracle. So it's Oracle's, the various components that are involved, they're all Oracle technologies, and Oracle has really taken those components, linked them together, and built them out and doing a solution accelerator, as George mentioned, for your PeopleSoft system. And really, if you're using PeopleSoft, if you're an Oracle customer and you consider yourself an Oracle shop, you might consider other solutions that might be less costly out of the box, whatever the reason might be. But if you're looking at other imaging solutions, as I mentioned, getting a solution from the vendor that you're already working with on the PeopleSoft side might benefit you greatly from the standpoint of when you're doing upgrades, your support channels, the various things that you might encounter with processing your invoices. You're going to be able to go to one vendor for your resolution. As I mentioned as well, it's a loosely coupled yet tightly integrated integration. So other Oracle technologies are used to really link the components, link the imaging system with the PeopleSoft system. Very strong technologies like SOA and BPM. So providing the SOA layer to really help you integrate and keep it open and flexible so it can be modified or customized, I guess you could say, to meet your exact needs, while also maintaining separate systems so as you make modifications or changes in one, you won't break anything in the other. and it's really cost effective. So you're already utilizing what you have in place from a PeopleSoft side. Already taking advantage of the workflows that you already have inside PeopleSoft, augmenting them with other workflows, and then adding the value add components of the capture piece, the extraction piece, the monitoring piece to really provide you with that end-to-end solution. And if you decide to start with imaging for accounts payable, as most organizations do, as therein lies the paper problem, the imaging solution that Oracle provides can be extended to other applications. So as you look to maybe extend it to human capital management or travel and expense, one instance of the imaging system can support all those other processes within your business.
Jason, if I may add, and this is not unusual, we typically have seen this in multiple customers, but since this is very real and is going on for me over the last 2 weeks, the city government I mentioned before, they have, as I said, they've already been using this, and for PO-based invoices in particular, they've been processing these like within the same day. So almost immediately they've seen some benefit. We'd like to, basically, when we're working with our customers, work with them over time to kind of understand, where the cost savings are. But I go back to one of those earlier slides that Jason showed in terms of like cost per index, and the cost per invoice. Cost per invoice and the productivity savings. Those are almost the easiest ROI calculations to do when you're talking about an imaging product or a content management PeopleSoft integration project.